All right, super fun episode coming your way.
This is basically, should your brand make a show episode? And probably the answer is yes. We're going to talk
100%.
all about brand content, short sitcoms that brands are making on TikTok and Instagram and all of the things. And we get into some really good examples, and we talk about why they work and why they don't work, or how they could be better. All the things you need to know.
Yes, you should be making content. We even have a checklist in here to check your ROI. And it's really emblematic of a larger perspective of what's going on within marketing and all of the fundamentals that you and your brand should be participating in.
All right, enjoy. Let us know what you think.
Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
All right, here we are. Welcome to Good Thinking.
Well, hello. How's it going? How you
Good.
doing?
I'm surviving is how it is. We're back to school. We're quite busy, which I'm grateful for. Yeah, but the school thing and getting everybody back, middle school starting, and all the things that come with that, and then curating my son's one-on-one program is, just a lot of puzzle pieces.
Parenting is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not.
No. Anyway, but what is more fun is talking about what we're going to talk about today, maybe.
Yes, I'm super excited. Yeah. Content
Very light.
boom.
Yes.
Working
content
title.
boom. Yes. Everything that you experience on this podcast, you should know, is a working title until it's published, and then the title may change by the time this is published. But yeah, wanted to talk about something that I feel like I've just been sharing so many examples of this. And, Patrick Kofi from the Wall Street Journal just wrote about this. And I think it's in the air is, I don't know what we're going to call it, sitcoms that people, brands are making, or content. Content just lumps it with all the other content, which is why I struggle with it. And it kind of needs its own name because it's not a sitcom, right? But they kind of are like a lot of sitcoms. But essentially, brands creating content. Oh, God.
This is how we get, remember, we start with the bad ideas. We start with the bad ideas, and then they get better and better. This is the process.
Normally we've had one when we start with something that bad.
Yes, fair enough.
But anyway, we'll come up with, and maybe somebody already, genius person like Rachel Carton has already named this, and I'll find it before I write about it.
Well, I would also love to know thoughts. What should this category or situation be called? Because whether or not it's actually a name or you're just workshopping it, I'm here for it.
Yeah. But let's talk about it. Let's give some examples. And then I was interested in kind of as I was going through and kind of pulling off all of these examples, I think we should go one by one, but I think we can also talk about them as a category of content because there's some distinct similarities. And some people are doing it better than others.
Yeah, I think a big picture overview of what we're talking about would be helpful, and then we can dig in one by one.
Yeah. All right. I think the best way to describe it is to talk about one as an example of many. But essentially, there was I wrote about it, was it this week or last week? I'm not sure. But I wrote about Bilt, which is a finance platform, like a fintech company that allows you to pay rent and get points for it, like when you get credit card points, so you can use them for traveling and rewards and things like that. Smart, kind of, honestly. But they created a show called Roomies, and Roomies is a currently standalone account that has gone viral and I would say it's very Kimmy Schmidt vibes. It's very I don't want to say silly, but it's
like a
humorous.
Slapstick, vibe to it.
Yeah,
for sure.
It has a sitcom energy, is why I think Patrick referred to it as sitcom, because it is that very kind of almost cheesy. But what I think is also doing is poking fun at that category of content, right? It's not trying to be that content. It's almost there's sort of a parody of that content happening throughout a lot of this content, right? So on a whole, it's also making fun of, we've got allergies today. Bless you.
Who knows what's happening?
All right. But, Yeah, so they made this show. It's got like 9 episodes now, and each one is kind of like a different scenario. And this particular show is all about like kind of like the pleasure, shall we say, of living in New York City and renting as like a young 20-person-year-old living in somewhat maybe like not the perfect rental. And I think what's interesting is that Bilt is able to kind of play into these common topics of like the struggle of renting, because truthfully, you're paying rent even if you don't like your apartment. So it doesn't matter to them that you don't like your apartment. And it's not a platform that like rents out apartments, right? So like the shitty apartment like situation is not their problem. Like you're going to pay rent on it, and you should make some rewards if you're staying in a shitty apartment. So anyway, they created this content. It's very funny. It's kind of taken off, and it's very, very removed from the brand, this particular one.
I think that's what many of them have in common, actually. Like,
well, the best ones have in common,
yes,
I think.
Yes. I guess the ones that resonate with me the most is they're pushing it, they're trying things, they're a little unhinged. Again, those are the ones that I like the most. They're a little unhinged, and they're supporting a insight into what their company actually does, but they're not directly connected.
Right.
And I think if it were directly connected, you wouldn't want to watch it.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I was not quoted in that article by Patrick, but Patrick and I had a conversation about this topic. And that's okay, Patrick. I'm happy to be in the background. But one of the things that I was talking to, he was like, oh, this feels like, it's like, is it a kind of a lie, right? Like a stealth thing that brands are doing? Like, is it deceptive that you are this brand and you've created this content and you haven't really but it's in their, I don't know, bio line, but it's not like at the end of each content, like sponsored by Bilt.
Right.
Created by Bilt. And, my view on it is like, no. I mean, like it's not deceptive. I think the whole purpose of kind of branded content in general is that it's there to entertain, be part of the ether, right, of people's lives, like, and add value. Hopefully, if you're doing great marketing. If you're not thinking that your marketing is adding value, then you're probably not doing the right kind of marketing. So it should be something, generally speaking, I think all things that brands should do are adding value. And this is adding value through entertainment, which I think is totally fine. But it is interesting that, as a brand, like Bilt is probably just not that interesting. And if you had the Bilt logo on it, you would just be like, do I want to watch this? Because it feels so, but then it's winning on merit, right? And then Bilt can take credit for it.
But that's what I think is so interesting. Yeah. And I think it's a great point and a great question. Is it deceptive? And I don't think it is, but I think it is removed. And I think I give brands like Bilt a lot of kudos for being that confident to put something out there and not have to have like somewhere, the CEO had to sign off to like, okay, well, I don't know, what the ROI is, but we're not going to put the logo in there. And I think it makes it that much more open to be viral, open for people to watch it because of that. And I think they are getting credit for it at the end of the day, but just in a different way than maybe we're used to in the past, which I'm 100% here for.
I actually think it ties to two things we talked about in the newsletter, both of which Rachel had pointed to, which so Rachel did a great interview with Bilt, and they interviewed in there and they said it's a significant investment, not just from the perspective of a financial perspective of filming this show, but a significant investment of strategy, time, and effort, right?
Yeah.
And then the effort is really what comes up in the second, most recent newsletter that we wrote about. I talked about how Emily and Rachel had also talked about. Now we're entering an era, or we have entered an era rather, where effort in marketing is once again being rewarded and appreciated and applauded. And so no one's worried that this is marketing. No one's oh God, if they find out it's marketing, they're like, oh, that's gross. I can't believe they're so deceptive. No, everyone's this is great marketing, guys. Well done, Bilt. And they're getting credit for it. People are talking about it. So I think it's just we're in a different era where I think for a really long time we were in this everything has to be UGC and it has to look like a, put absolutely zero effort into trying to market to anyone. And now everyone's like, no. If you're going to like put in the effort for the marketing, we're here for it. Like, let's like go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just in a different mindset.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's really on to something. And I think that's why this is so significant. And quite honestly, I think that's why we're talking about this, because it's not just like, oh, look, these are really, cute shorts, cute interstitials, whatever, whatever we're going to figure out how to call them. But it's really significant of a change within marketing, right? This is something that is happening. It's a significant, so there's a lot of planning that goes into this. There's a lot of strategy. There are a lot of costs within this. And it takes time and, all leading up to effort. But I think the way it's being put out, instead of being brand first, it's looking at the customer first.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we really entertain? And that's a switch. That's completely a change. I mean, I did, back in the day, we created something called Mall World, which was like, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago. And they did on MTV and all of the things with American Eagle, but it was very kind of brand first. And that was what you were leading with. And I think the idea of certainly Roomies, and I think of many of the others we're going to talk to, is, to me, it's the brand has said, okay, what's the insight that our customer really wants? And that's where they're starting. And I think that's fascinating, to be like, we're going to entertain them. We're going to do all of these things that we think are relevant. We're going to create something that we think is interesting, and then play back, oh yeah, and then by the way, it's powered or built by Bilt, which is completely a different paradigm.
Totally. And I think one of the things that I read in an interview with Bilt, I think it was in the Rachel Carton one, but I don't know at this point, it all blurs together, but was that, they also, it's not like, it's very different kind of content creation than, even 10 years ago, where you would concept a show like this and it would be normal to say like, okay, we're going to run this 6-episode show, whatever. And it's like done and dusted. Now, like, they're kind of shooting this content, not live, but like the next episodes are not planned yet. They're being informed by the comment section, where people are like, oh yeah, like this is this funny thing, or like, like it's very much like a moving object, it's really active. And I think, not to tie it back to another conversation we're always having, but like, I think for a long time there was this like very sort of like precious way of marketing. And now it's like both effort and not precious. And that's like that's a really like interesting comfort level thing that brands have to get used to. And Bill talks about how they have like people, they brought talent like in-house. So they made this in-house, not with an agency. But I don't really think that's the distinctive part about it, because you read it and it's really fractional talent, which is essentially like building an agency within your business. So like whatever you want to do, like it's more that they built the team who can have that comfort level, right? So they've got the TikTok mindset, but they probably also have somebody who's pretty good with writing scripted content, because you need to be able to write it fast, and it's not going to go through like 1,000 years of like, it's not a Netflix show. It's not like fake 2 years out and then released. And I think that's really like an interesting thing, because brands are not really, they're used to doing things fast, but then the fast things in the past haven't required as much effort,
Right.
So you make like UGC and everyone's like, oh, it's like, TikTok videos and like little like voiceover thingies, and you can't make those in advance. So you make them on the fly, like during like, all the time. But those were low lift things, and these are high lift things. And it's so like this, like these worlds melding together. And it's very, very different. It requires a really different team, and it requires a really different mindset.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, and I think it's so emblematic of like the good parts when you're doing marketing, right? This is what's happening, right? There is a strategy behind it. There's insights. And I really do think each of these, to me, the ones that really hit it, there's a real insight of like, okay, what does the customer really, really, really want to see? Not apartments and this, but like, what's the at a soul level, at a really like emotional level, what are we driving? I think there is kind of this effort, which we're all appreciating. And then I think there's a confidence within a brand to be able to do that. I think they're leading customer first. And I think there's an entertainment value. And there's, again, a confidence in that, of saying like, we're not going to tie it directly to our brand. We're going to do something that's a little bit arm's length. And there's a confidence in doing that we think people will ultimately then get recognition, or the brand will have an ROI, or whatever that looks like. There will be some type of appreciation of that, but there's a little bit of risk in that. And I think seeing brands and companies like Bilt do that is really beautiful. And I think that's where we're moving from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, Bilt also knows that the majority of like probably currently their customer is this kind of younger Gen Z audience too. So they need to cut through in the right way, and brand awareness, like, is always like historic. Like, I don't care what you say about performance marketing, I would call it mostly like bullshit from the past. Like, wherever you got your numbers from, you're going to see the lift or you're not, right? And like, I think that's the truth. Like, for the most part, like, we now know that like these attributions and all of this stuff was basically just made up. So to me, like, you're looking and you're seeing, like, are people sharing this? Are people talking about it? Are people commenting on it? Are people feeling seen in it? And are you then like consequently seeing people sign up for Bilt? Like, and maybe not, but maybe just the fact that they even know your name now is maybe just good enough.
Right. I think that's a great checklist, actually. I think that's a really important checklist. All right. Should we start digging into some others?
Yeah, let's throw some more examples on the fire. I mean, some of these are ones that I've shared in the past, but some of them are new. Tell me what's on the list. What's next?
Bittarverse.
Yes. So Alexis Bittar, I would say, like, can one ever say somebody is the OG of anything anymore? Like, who really knows? But to me, like, they are the OG of this style of content. They created the Bittarverse back in, I want to say maybe 2021-ish, something like that. And, like in the interview, Patrick interviews them, and they said, like, yeah, like, originally we never talked about the product and we were just making something to entertain myself. And I think like that is like, quite honestly, if you are your customer, like, that brand is very like particular. It's very like high-end luxury, jewelry. Like, you probably are your own customer if you started that company in the first place. So like, great to have that as an insight. Like, not every brand can have that. But they created this, it's hysterical parody of like this New York socialite woman, and then she has her assistant who she's terribly abusive towards. And this show has been going on, I don't know, 3 years now, at least, like 4 years. And it goes through seasons, right? And that's so much of what is happening in these shows. Like, they don't run year long. Like, Roomies is not going, I would doubt, like, stay for like going on every week for the rest of time, right? Like, it's going to go off and then it comes back on, and like that missing it, that FOMO is like part of the cycle of these shows, like, just like the TV. And she's so entertaining. Like, the episodes, one of the things I would say that they didn't do, and I, probably because they had no idea it was going to be as good as it is, right? But like, they did not separate it from their social account. And when you go on Alexis Bittar's like regular social, these episodes are getting thousands of views, thousands of comments. And then like the regular content is like hovering around 100 to 200, likes, which is not, like, perhaps not that surprising, because like, quite honestly, like, they're very different types of content. Like, one is designed to engage you, and one is designed to like inform you of their products. And like, they're not going to have the same, they're never going to have the same like kind of likability, like, you're not clapping for like, they made a really nice bracelet, like, but I do wonder if there's a tension there, right? Like, would it have been better for this to have lived on its own channel?
Well, I think you bring up a great question. And I think, part of the fact that they are so OG in creating this content and other things, but that wasn't the thing that you did then. So my question to you is, okay, if you're a brand doing it today, is that a must? Do you need to do it as a separate channel? Because for sure, there's brands that are listening, trying to figure out what their content strategy is.
Again, I mean, I obviously read way too much Rachel, because I'm going to like reference something else she said again. I don't even really know her, but I feel like I know her,
we all feel like we know her through you. So yes.
Yes. So she wrote about an observation that she had where like TikTok shows in particular, we've talked about this before, like TikTok shows in particular like channels for brands do better when they are of like one singular vein of content, right? Like where there's not like a variety, whereas on Instagram that's less so the case. But like on TikTok, certainly I think now the like for sure the belief would be that this should live on its own because it has this purity to it, and you land on it, and then you want to see that content and no other content. You're not really rewarded for the variety.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair point. I think what's interesting, one of the things that's interesting for me in this is a lot of these are on Instagram, not TikTok. I think it makes sense for sure to have it as a separate channel on TikTok, and that's what we're seeing. And maybe that's only what you're doing on TikTok.
Roomies is
but
on
I think
both.
what's interesting,
it's on both.
Interesting.
And that's common too. Like they'll be on both network like platforms. Like that's really common. I think, and often like, and then I have a bunch in here that are on YouTube, and you'll see that it's like they like kind of take edits and clips, and they should use those on Instagram, and then they push to YouTube. And I always think it's really hard to get one person from one platform to another. So like, I don't know if I love that strategy. Like I think the content ideally would just be living natively in every location, but like you then have a harder time of tracking the ROI, right? Like it's divided between this and this and
this that ROI.
This. But like I was gonna say one more thing, but I can't remember what it is. So
all right, well,
we'll carry on.
We can just sit and wait for it. All right, moving to YouTube, let's talk about Little Caesar, Pretzel Crust Island. I mean,
yeah. So this one, to me, like this is kind of an example of where, for me, it like goes too far, right? Like it's very slapstick. Like it's supposed to be kind of a parody of like Survivor.
Right. And it is
like
a parody of Survivor.
Yeah.
They're successful in that.
They are successful in that. And like I will say that I kept thinking about Hudson, and because like I think he's probably much more the Little Caesar like audience than I am. Yeah. And like watching somebody have a giant thing of melted cheese dumped on their head would probably like work for Hudson. But for me, I was just like, oh, okay, is this the payoff? Like, no. But essentially, like they have all these like weird contestants. Yeah, weird contestants, and they do these kind of spoofy Survivor-ish things, and then they have beef like just like between the contestants. They're like talking shit about one another and like trying to like get one another off the show, like just like a Survivor episode or like, you know, any other show like that. And then whoever is eliminated gets cheese poured all over their head, like you would get slimed back in the Nickelodeon days.
That's exactly what it keeps for me. Yes.
Yes.
Right. This, yeah. Okay. That's a great description. That's exactly what it is. This doesn't, I feel like we're like, this is like fashion. What is it? In or not? Hot or not? It didn't work for me because of a couple of different reasons. I think Little Caesar has such an opportunity to like be beyond the unhinged brands at this moment. Like it started with like all Caesar. What was the Little Caesar? Like there's that whole, like they were unhinged 20 years ago, right? So they could really push into that, in my opinion, and really start to do some things that we're all taking notice to. But it's missing a couple of things. It's missing the fact that they have an insight. Right. They're not, in my opinion, reaching into like, this is actually what our customers wanting. This is really what nor is it reaching into how are we owning that from a brand standpoint. They're taking somebody else's IP, right? They're taking Survivor and latching onto that versus creating their own, whatever the fuck it could be. It could be like, you know, that little pizza guy, the whatever, like there's a lot of really weird things that they could, I'm sure, go into the archives of and pull out and make modern and relevant today. And they obviously have the appetite to be unhinged. I think it's just missing for me really the insights into really understanding their customer and their brand to really be able to push it and have us take notice versus to just be a part of what everybody else is doing.
Yes. Yeah. It felt like there was no point in watching the payoff. You know, you just want to skip to the end where the guy gets the cheese or whatever you call it. And like that to me is not great value for content. But, you know, like I'm 100% not their audience, but I agree with you. Like, I think that brand like should be crazy. Like it should be totally lunatic.
Yeah. Leading the unhinged charge. No.
Yeah.
All right. InStyle, the intern?
This one is funny. Like this show is like on its 3rd season. This particular season has done really well. The numbers are wild. I shared them in the last newsletter. And I think it's funny because I think it's clever for a couple reasons. One, it is very much like The Office. So essentially, like the premise of it is that they have this intern, they hire this intern to come in, and then essentially the intern is like terrible, right? And does all the things that you don't want an intern to do, like reorganize the closet. You know, they have like this samples closet, and she goes in and she like, it's the thing that I always talk about, like always follow someone's rules for the first 3 months, then come up with your own rules by the 6th month, and then you're off to the races. But until then, like, do not touch anything because you do not understand the systems that you are trying to replace.
Right.
And it's like,
and this is the beauty closet. The beauty closet is like everything, like
sacred.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Exactly.
And
yeah.
so she goes in and she like, you know, and then she gets locked in there, and like it's just very funny, and it's very
And
much
she's
like
very
The
funny.
Office.
She's very
excellent.
funny. Like
The
it's a
casting
lot
is-
about her personality and how much she's just like driving. Everything needs to be filmed. Everything is about media. Everything is about content.
Yes. And so much of the success of these shows, I will say, is in the casting. And that's something we're going to talk about Argos in a minute. But like Argos, I think very much deliberately cast comedians, like TikTok comedians, because these comedians like know how to do the delivery, right? And I don't know how they found this girl, but like I know through the interview that I read about this, like that they spent a really long time casting this show. Like this show, the planning for the show of the casting and like the premise of it is a long journey. So like, but they too are filming it kind of as they're going, right? So they're getting comments and then they're evolving it and doing all of this stuff. So I think like that's another, like, you know, having essentially like a team that can be like casting directors is no small feat.
Yeah.
Not everybody is cut out to do that, but so much of it is in the delivery. I like this one too because it like pulls on things that it's like, you know, you could have done a literal documentary where you like take somebody and you're like, this is the InStyle closet and like da 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 da, and like here's all this cool stuff, and like that's interesting, and like that style of content also exists where like it's sort of like the what's boring to you is interesting for everyone else content, right? Like that the New York Library has done, and like lots of public parks have done, and like this is all kind of related in terms of like effort content, but this is different in terms of it being scripted. And I just think it's interesting because
it's a good point.
InStyle is not like a brand, as a brand, something that I'm like, oh, InStyle. Like that's what I know. But this show has made me think that they're more relevant. So I'm like now like, oh, maybe InStyle's like on it. Who knows?
Which is impressive, and I think exactly the point. And I think it's quite interesting. Like I think it's a switch that I think it's more interesting the way that they're doing it than if it was actually a documentary or docuseries of the interns that are in there, because I think you get to see a personality that quite honestly feels pretty authentic and pretty realistic from her. Whereas and we know casting real people, like it's harder. It's not the same. There's a harder kind of vulnerability and more walls and things that you don't necessarily get to see. And I think because it's cast and because she has such a great personality and you're really the way that it's filmed, all that, it feels like you're kind of an insider, but it really feels like it's bringing out the personality and all of the parts and pieces that you would want to see in a documentary or docuseries. But I think the reality of shooting with real people, you never quite get that. It never quite feels as fun, and you never quite feel as invited as you do in this show.
Yeah. They do a really good job of making it feel almost real, which is different like some of the others that are not trying to, like Roomies is not trying to be realistic, right? Like it's shot like it's less, but that's fine. It's just the style.
Right. But there's parts of it where you are like the parents and like that does feel realistic. Okay. Should we move to Argos?
Yes. Argos. I don't know how we say it.
Oh man.
Do you know what Argos is?
Yes. But you should.
Okay. Well, for anyone that doesn't know, like I grew up with it. It was like the highlight of the calendar year would be like getting the Argos catalog and going through it to pick out your Christmas, pick out your Christmas presents. Like,
so this is the bougie European version of the Sears catalog for anybody listening.
Yeah, but it's not bougie. And they had like, they were famous because like they were kind of different in my mind, because you got the catalog, and then they had these like high street storefronts where you would go in and you would take your catalog in and you'd be like, this is the one I want. And then they would like put in the order and then you could go and pick it up there. Like it wasn't, this was like before all of this, like, you know, things were delivered to your house. And now essentially it's just like an online store. But that's, and they stocked everything. It's a little bit like Walmart. Like you can get like a blender and like that's where you would go to get a fan, but you could also get like your Lego sets and like your Hot Wheels, and like it had everything, like a section for everything. And so they have a show that's called Arghaüs, and it's like a satire of like these artists, kind of like these personalities who like take themselves all too seriously, and they're like very like into conceptual art, and then they use the products like in a spoofy way. So it's like, okay, we're gonna do our like wind like meditation exercises now for you, like getting ready for, you know, your next like show. And then they're like using the fan, like holding it up, and like, and it's like, oh, we're gonna go around in a circle and everybody's gonna hold the Hot Wheels, like, you know, the thing that you hold and you like, it's your talking stick. You're gonna hold the Hot Wheels talking stick and it's gonna get passed around, and then there's drama and da-da. But the casting of it is like the who's who in the UK of like TikTok comedians. Like everybody who's everybody is in this show. So there's also the pull of all of their audiences who love these. Like they do a really, I think it's like, whereas the Little Caesar one feels very, very spoofy, but I don't know who any of those people are. Like I know who all of those comedians are, and they all are playing like versions of characters that they play in their own TikTok channels, you know? So like Abby, who I've been following since the pandemic, and she was making like silly videos with her parents who are absolutely hysterical. But she does a lot of these kind of sitcom-y kind of bits that she has. Like she has this ongoing bit with like two office workers. It's very funny if you're like from the UK and like want to talk about like office like secretary humor. But like, so she's very much like a character that you would imagine her playing on her TikTok. And so I think it's smart because it's kind of like, it's a little unhinged, it's a little weird. It pulls in the products in a very like kind of funny way. And it uses their existing audiences to grow the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this, like, I feel like we're giving awards for each of these. Like this to me is the best kind of all around. Like it does a great job of being unhinged, but it also does a great job of being on brand and actually showcasing the products. The casting is there, the delivery, like all of those parts and pieces. And the casting, not just in being comedians and being able to deliver it, but also to your point, you know, using their audience to then let people know about it. Like I think from a brand standpoint of really looking to like sell the products and push the products, it does a good job of that without there like being a ick factor of like feeling like it's over the top. And I think that's also part of the reason why these work, even if it does feel, you know, like it's pushing it or QVC, like there's such an unhinged mentality behind it. And it's so obvious, like nobody's hiding anything in any of these. Like it feels like it is what it is. And you're very clear on that. And that feels refreshing from an audience standpoint to just be like, here it is. Here's the thing that we're doing.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, so this brings me to like a broader theme that I wanted to discuss with you, because it's something that comes up for us a lot when we work on positioning with brands, right? A lot of brands are really afraid, probably rightfully so, about becoming a humorous brand, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of like, that's a big lift. It's like, there's so many brands that are funny now. And like, can we be funny enough? And da da da. And I think like part of my feeling on it is like I think every brand now is peddling in the market of entertainment, right? Like that is what your social channel is for. You're not there to like inform people that you sell fans. If you're there to inform people that you sell fans and the types of fans, you should be doing that somewhere else. And I think they realize that, right? Like they don't need to show you the fan. They need to like, you know, bring you in and make you think about Argos when you're going to buy a fan. And I think that you can't like it. Yeah, it's effort. Like that's what this whole conversation about is like today. Like I think there is no like low lift successful brand. You're going to have to put in the effort somewhere. You're going to have to put it in like Merit puts it in, where they make like very, very bougie, like beautiful campaigns and like high-end products. So you're going to have to put it in through the humor. You're going to have to put in the effort somewhere. So pick your poison
Yeah.
and start making the effort work for you, because
Yes.
that's where we are.
That needs to be its own podcast episode. But tying back to the humor thing, I think it's a really good point, and we hear about this a lot, and we just did a workshop where we talked about it. I think it's fascinating because humor, so many brands want to do that and want to be that, but I think they're afraid. And I think they're afraid of a lot of things. I think humor is vulnerability. And sometimes it's going to hit and sometimes it's not. And I think there's also a scale of humor, right? There can be like a wink, there can be wit, and sillies on the other end that I think few brands, maybe Little Caesars, few brands really want to be. But I think it's an interesting scale. And I do think there's a confidence in wanting to have some type of humor. And there's also an upkeep within that. Like you can't just do it once and be like, we did that one funny thing. If you really want that to be your tone of voice, it has to be a part of that. But I think it's also about brands in general, and we talk about tone of voice a lot, of that it's just so underutilized and underrecognized as such an ability within a brand. We all talk about how it looks, but how the brand sounds, and really it's how it really connects with you. And I think we all expect brands to have a personality in their voice. Like there needs to be something that you want to connect with something. And so oftentimes I think that can be humor, but it is a little bit more about the right timing, about the right parts and pieces. And it's for sure harder to nail. But I think for brands that want to do that, they should absolutely lean into that. And I think it's interesting.
Well, I was going to say, like, I think that Alexis Bittar is a great example of a brand that, like, is not 100% humor, right? Like, they're doing humor in a really elevated way that, like, is isolated to that show. You could argue that maybe the show should live on its own platform, but, like, it feels of the ilk, like, the aesthetic of the whole show and like the personality and everything, it feels like it's up here, right? It's in line with kind of their brand. So they can do the humor up here and it still feels on brand. Like they have like Law Roach came on like one episode that I linked to when I shared it with you. And like, they have like credibility now from this show that they are able to like, there's a lot of celebrities who show up on the later episodes of the, like not in the early seasons, but like in the later seasons, like they have actors and stylists and everybody who are on these shows and they want to be on these shows and they're
right.
And like there's 0% like that makes me think that Law Roach thinks that he's funny. But like they have him come on and do it in a way that feels really right and elevated, and he's in on the joke and like we're all in on the joke and it feels fine. And so I think like I would say like there is a way for you to do it without being fully unhinged. And I think that's the example.
For sure. I think a wink. Yeah, there's a wink. I think there's for sure a way. And most brands should do it unless you're Little Caesars or whatever it might be. Should not go full unhinged. I mean, even Oatly that, we were talking about earlier, that has that is not, I wouldn't say is fully unhinged. Apparently it's one of the examples that we'll talk about leaning maybe away from that. But I think Alexis Bittar, like there is a wink in that brand. They clearly don't take themselves too seriously. Like there's a Joan Collins-esque to that brand and everything that they do. And so and I think they're just leaning into that aspect of it, which I think is a really good example and really good way to use humor.
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be in every aspect. Like not every like bit of copy that they write is like humorous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That would be over the top. Okay. Oatly or Tower 28?
Let's just touch on Tower 28 because I think it's interesting. I wrote about it. I think they very much were tapping into it. I'd say I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I think one of the things that I think they do wrong, and I wanted to like kind of bring it in as example of like where I think actually it doesn't work, that they've tried to make it too much about the brand and too much about the product. So it's not really like tapping into a universal truth, which is, I mean, I'm not a comedy expert, but like I'm pretty sure that that's what the essence of comedy is. You like point out something that like everybody's feeling and you're like, oh yeah, me too. And you just say it really funny. And so like when they make it like about the blush being, it's like it's to get in on the joke with them. Whereas when you're talking about the universal truth of like, man, my super is not like anywhere to be found in my apartment building, and my apartment air conditioning is broken. And like, if you've lived in New York City in your 20s, like I have, that is a universal truth that like we can all laugh about and like commiserate over. But like your blush, like doing that to you is like, it's a little harder. I think it's
Yeah.
a good effort, and I'm glad that they tried it, because I think as a brand, it's like, is good to try things. But I think they would have been stronger if they'd have gone into more of the universal truths of like, there's so many universal truths of getting ready.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could argue that the universal truth is like to Tower 28 audience, it's the blush thing, to Bilt, which has a much larger section of audience, right? Of feeling different things, different ages, different. Whereas Tower 28 is obviously focused more on kind of makeup and beauty. But I do think, I agree, I think it has a much more limited shelf life. I think you're less interested in it because it is so product focused. And if it was more getting ready, to your point, like a larger truth within that, but I still think it's, a smaller segment than, New York apartments necessarily. But I think to me, it has a limited shelf life because it is so product focused. Like that to me is and I think it's a good example because I think they do it well, but I think it's like, okay, you can choose this, be product focused, but here's the thing, it's not going to be as widely talked about. People aren't going to tune into it. It's not going to be this because it's much clearer of what it is. Whereas when it's more kind of for the entertainment value without the product plug, it feels better. And I think people want to watch it and tune in more.
Yeah, I do think that this one was more related to a campaign. And I think if that's part of the strategy, you're like, okay, like like, we have a new blush coming out, da 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 da, like, and you want this to be like a micro series that's just related to this product and this release, and it doesn't have like, the Intern is like, 3 seasons in, Alexis Bittar is like 8 seasons in, like maybe that's not the strategy. And in which case, like, great. Like,
Right.
have that not be the strategy. Let's talk about Oatly. We also have CDPH in there, and then I don't know who else we have.
Patagonia and Bandit. But yeah,
We'll go
we're
through
wrapping.
it quickly. All right.
Yes.
Let's go through. Well, let's talk about CDPH, then we'll talk about Oatly, because I think it's more related to the ones after it. So CDPH is the Chicago Public Health group, I guess, organization. Is the people who run the public health system in Chicago. And actually, we were involved in the strategy of this, so I should just say that.
Yes.
An amazing agency that we do a lot of fractional work for, youth marketing. You should look into them. I've mentioned them before in the newsletter. They do a lot of college marketing. They're amazing. They did not pay me to say that. I just really like that team.
Yeah.
They are fantastic to work with. But they were brought on by CDPH to work on like a vaping cessation campaign for high school students. And one of the suggestions that we made and like was like concepting this show around like, how do you make vaping cessation and like, it's such a dry topic into something that is entertaining. And so they created this 6-part show. It was very short-lived. It was, like most public health campaign, it was a true campaign that like just lives for a moment. But it was about trying to like bring out sort of the whole like concept of the two people is like, one person is vaping, and then like, me and Nick broke up, and like she's like supposed to be breaking up with her nicotine like vaping pen, and then and it's a parody on sort of like all of the things that like, when he like a situationship where it's like you never really are breaking up, and like then you're spending all your money on them, and you're like spending all your time, and you're sneaking off with them, and you're doing all of these things. So one of the things I like about this, like, maybe because I was part of it, but like one of the things I like about it is that vaping cessation and like the Chicago Public Health are just like very, very unsexy, right? Like it's like you could not try to tell a 17-year-old to pay attention to a vaping cessation campaign. So it's like, there's a lot of conversations around like, how do you quit vaping? And this was part of a broader thing where they had like UGC and people talking about it, the show, and it allowed people to kind of share it and say, this is a funny episode about like, this really sums up for me, like what trying to quit nicotine feels like. And I think that can be another way of kind of bringing about a show where it has like a purpose, like it was very much like very targeted thing for these students to share it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so for this. Like, I think this is brilliant of creating something that within such a dry and just it is unsexy, but it's also a bit shameful, like you don't really want to go there aspect. And so to create it and turn it into content that really has this message, I think is amazing. And, would love to be part of those things all day long. I think that's like, to be able to use this space to do that. Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was really brave of the Chicago public health system. Like they were really on board with doing something provocative. And I think, we've talked about like health trends in general, but I think this goes into that. And I think that like Bilt is another example. Like Bilt is not B2B, but it's a fintech company. And like it's not sexy. And it's like it's much more dry and like what are they going to tell you, like, oh, here's like how much you can save, or like here's the rewards that you can have on your, like, it's very like pie charts life. And you can have 50% of people who like vape get acne. No one is changing their vaping habits because somebody told them like 50% anything. So I think it's all of these shows, like it's about having a more relevant way of like sharing the content and a more entertaining way of sharing your content. Which brings me to Oatly.
Yes.
So you saw this and you were like, I saw it and I liked it. I liked it because I think shows that have old grandparents in them are hysterical.
You really love that. You really got a soft spot.
I really do have a soft spot for like watching old people try matcha. Like, yes, I sign me up. So they have this show, I can't remember the name of it. It's like Coffee with My Abuelo, something like that.
You need like an OnlyFans channel where it's just old people drinking matcha and like do it, raking or just doing
Take
things.
all my money. I don't need that. Please don't send me anything like that if you're listening. I really know. I'm so afraid of what we're going to get. Yeah. But so Oatly's this was a show. They did it on YouTube, I think, primarily. And it's more what I would call like a kind of a docuseries like mini show. So they have like this, I think it's 6 episodes, again, like a lot of these shows are like very short and then they might come back again, right, with another season. But this is like they take this guy who is quite adorable, takes his grandfather who's also quite adorable to these like coffee shops and has his grandfather who's probably a traditionalist try these kind of like bougier and bougier and bougier coffee and caffeinated beverages set up. And then the grandfather is like reviewing them and like giving his like, like thumbs up or comments on it. And I think it's funny. Like, I think it's a nice way to pull in the product, right? Like you obviously see them making the drinks and like it talks about the versatility of the product without ever having to speak to the versatility of it. And it talks about how it's like used at all the best like spots and all the cool spots, like use Oatly. So I think it's decent at like getting the product in there and it's fairly entertaining and cute, but it's not as like, oh my God, I have to share this with you. Like, I can't wait to send this to you. And I think that is like the problem with it. And Kirsten was like, this should be so much more unhinged. And then I was giving her the like lookbook, like I've shared the Oatly lookbook and like people love it. Like, but it's like Oatly at a time when everybody is going more unhinged, they are growing up and like trying to become kind of like a place where they are taken more seriously. And I think part of it is that there's so many players in their space that took their unhingedness, which was so unique in the category, that they are now like, okay, well, we're evolving, right? Like we have to kind of like keep growing as a brand and doing things and being in a different place. And they're doing kind of the unhinged thing, but also trying to show that they're like good quality, that they make great drinks, like that this is like the barista's choice type of product.
Right. And I think that's interesting. I would just want to see it across the board with them, right? If they're really leaning into this, and I'm not sure like the food travel thing is like, such a unique space, but certainly I understand them wanting to evolve and wanting to move into a space where, they created, and there's certainly competitors within that. But I think like I'd want to see then, okay, you're known for your carton, like do something on that, like give me travel facts, give me something really interesting that I can, I've got 6 Oatly milk cartons in my fridge, like give me something that's inspiring within that. And then if I start to see it in other parts, great. But yeah, I'm not going to, and you didn't share this with me on Instagram. Like that's not something you're going to share of like, grandparents drinking matcha. Like it's not, doesn't have the viral aspect of it. And I think Oatly, because so many of these, again, that resonate with me are really unhinged, an opportunity to really lean into that. I get why they're not, if that's their larger brand strategy, but just knowing it's not going to be as interesting. And also where else are you pulling in that brand strategy and showing it to me? Because you got a lot of opportunities specifically with the cartons. So I'm here for it, but show it to me.
Yeah. And I think it also could be a yes and, right? Like you can have this show and you can also have another show that like lives simultaneously or is like a different thing and like can be two different kinds of like things. Like this one is showing like that you can make these really like great drinks, and like this one leans into your humor voice, like very like dry. Like if they had had some of the more dryness of what I associate with their copy in the tone of it, like almost like if the grandfather didn't like it, like it would be funnier. Um, because it's like that's more them, but in my mind.
Yeah. I guess it feels a little safe for me, whereas I think Oatly's been a brand that's been more brave. And I think one of the things that really works in this category is when you push a bit. And I think just like the Tower 28, like it's fine, it's cute, like it's well done, but it's very kind of product focused.
Yes.
And so I think this does a similar thing, whereas there's such opportunity in the particular space that we're talking about, the content, to really push it a bit more and push kind of on the edges of the brand. And I think that's really when it hits.
Yeah. And so that brings me to the last two, which I think are kind of in the same sort of family as like docu like things. And I wanted to bring Patagonia in it because I will say like Patagonia, like if Alexis Bittar is the OG of like sitcom style TV shows, like for brands and, you know, like Phase and everybody from there, like have been doing these shows forever, but they're not like owned by a brand. But I would say Patagonia is the OG of just making great content, right? Like they've made gazillion documentaries and really do invest in kind of this like storytelling piece. And they always have something new. So like I didn't know what I was literally looking for examples and I was like, oh, I'll just go on Patagonia's and find what they're doing right now because they are going to be doing one. Like, but it's not a show, it's more of a documentary. And I think what they're doing, which is something that Byron, you know, Byron, he writes Tapped In, talked about is that there's like a lot of like skill in like TikTok editing. Like, so I don't think that they quite have it nailed in this particular one, but like how, I don't know if you watch Diary of a CEO, but he like, whenever you see a clips of his, you're just like, oh my God, like I have to watch this entire 2-hour podcast.
It's so good.
Like whoever he hires to do his TikTok edits, and it's certainly not done by AI if you're thinking that. Like they are very, very well done where you're just like, oh, you're hanging on the edge of your seat type of thing. And so Patagonia is starting to kind of do that where you have like little bits and pieces of the video and then there's a larger um you know, story to be had. I think they could probably move towards more of a like like not like it doesn't need to be a linear like, oh, this is like the segments of the documentary cut up, but just more of a like shorter documentary style shows that can live individually. And that's sort of what Bandit has. This is from a year ago, but I still remembered it, so I included it as an example. It's called Dialed, I think, is the series that they did. It was like about all these different runners and like they do really well. Like it did really well at the time. Like that they did all these kind of like mini documentaries. They were all sort of filmed in a similar style that you could tell that they definitely use people like it's like, oh, we're just using somebody who works or lives nearby to the person we're filming. They're not all done by I don't think by one cinematographer or anything. But like all kind of in this like how do I get in the headspace? How am I like the best version of myself, you know? And yeah, I think it's those do have a lot of shares on them. And I will say, I think that is because runners like see the runner pain like as similar as somebody sees like these shows become like memes, right? Like you see yourself in it and then you have to share it with your friend who you know also has gone through like a terrible rental situation. Like it functions the same as a meme. And I think for runners, what's different is that for runners, like it's like that common pain is sort of like a meme.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a universal truth. I think Bandit, because it to me taps into a universal truth more than Patagonia. And I love Patagonia. I think they do a beautiful job of documentaries, but I think what we're talking about here digs deeper than that. Yeah. And so I think I'd love to see what Bandit does next. Hopefully they're like, because I think it's evolved. The space has evolved from a year ago. So I'd be super curious to see how much deeper they would go, how much more insightful they would do now, because I think there's for sure an opportunity. And I think these are great examples of not everything has to be unhinged, but it just has to go deep, right? Just show us something, pull in something that really is an insight that is a universal truth, and then build from that. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be unhinged. It doesn't have to be humorous, but do something that really you think your customer really is feeling and it is diving in from a deep strategic level. All right, we're done. We did it.
Fantastic. Okay. If you learned anything today, or if you have even more fun, if you have any like good shows that are, brand shows that you've seen that you're like, oh, this amazing brand is doing this over here, this is by no means, I know, exhaustive list. So drop it in the comments or, tell us that you worked on it and like let us talk about it another time. So yeah.
Yes. Would love to hear that. Would love to hear comments. Would love to hear, give us a good name for what we're going to call this category and all of the great examples that I'm sure all of the listeners have.
Yeah. And share this with your brand team so that you can go out and make some fun content and have a fun time at work.
Who doesn't want to be doing this?
Yes. Amazing.
All right. Stay curious.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.